I was at a local organic store buying just a couple of things today, and I had a very peculiar encounter. As I was walking around the store, I noticed this gentleman shopping, and I was mysteriously drawn to him in a way that I can't quite explain. And the attraction caught me off guard because I have been intentionally celibate, single, and closed down. And very rarely am I attracted to people, although it happens, but usually they are very powerful soul connections. And there's a lesson to be had from it, and those are not common. And part of me has wondered, with this new phase of development, what type of person I would be attracted to. And so I take notes when I see masculine energies, and I observe and I try to understand from an intellectual point of view what my new template might be. But today was very different because this was somebody that I couldn't really put into a box. And there was something about the energetic field that activated me in a very, very, very intense way. And I didn't know if it was mutual. I was trying to be polite and to not gawk or stare. But I took notice. And I was checking out behind them. There was somebody in between us. And right before they left, they turned all the way around, looked me square in the eyes, and we smiled. And I felt my heart chakra light up as they walked off. But what I wanted to share with you was that immediately following that, I felt scared. And what I realized as I was standing there waiting for my turn to pay, what I realized is that my subconscious mind, after all of this personal work, this journey, this intentional self-development, even I still struggle with being afraid of the experience of life that actually I'm longing for, which is to be very, very magnetized to somebody. And I don't want to project too much on top of this person because I don't know them. But what I found interesting is that just the prospect of having that magnetism actually frightened me, because it was so much deeper than what I had allowed myself to experience in the past, that actually it frightened me, even though it was something that the experience, I'm not talking about the person, but the experience is something that I want. And what I see in my client work and what I see in other people in the collective is that we often want things that terrify us. And we want experiences. It's better to say it like that, because that's what we are aiming for, rather than a collection of possessions or people. And this is very often why people run from the twin flame experience or the soul contract experience, because deep down inside, they don't know how to deal with the discomfort of being that intensely activated or magnetized. And being in a soul partnership is something that is highly, highly magnetic. And it's not always about romance, but there's usually something that draws you in and latches you on to that frame of reference in the picture of your life which is dead centered on another person who's activating you. And so what happens is that while your consciousness is entangled with them, you are learning, you are growing, you are evolving. And that degree of magnetism is what sticks you to that experience for as long as your soul needs. And some people need a short amount of time and others a lifetime. And many people are actually afraid of that depth of feeling. And it's quite uncomfortable to be present with that discomfort and to work with it and to still stay engaged in the contract. And so a lot of people have subconscious bells and whistles in their head, which communicate to them that this is not safe. So what ends up happening is that they engage in self-sabotage behaviors. I had to force myself to look this person in the eyes directly and not look away, because I was really trying to grow. Because in the past, I would have dodged the acknowledgement and sort of held it within and relied on the energetics to communicate that we were in alignment. And that is not the type of life that I'm trying to create now. I'm actually very intentional about this. That if there is an attraction with somebody, I don't want it to just be in the energetics. I don't want it to be hidden. I don't want it to be secret, and I don't want it to be buried anymore. I want it to come to life. But to have it come to life means that I have to receive it. I have to acknowledge it. And I have to be willing to put myself out there. And sometimes what you see in the soul contract experience is that people will be deeply engaged, but on the surface, they play it much more cool than anybody would expect. And it's a way of hiding the true depth of the experience as a way of protecting oneself. And what that does is that creates a lot of confusion. Some people are drawn to their soul contracts when they are partnered with somebody else. And so they keep it secret. They keep the depth of the relationship secret. And this is how I started, because my first twin flame experience, the person was married. And it was a horrific experience, but a beautiful lesson in self-love. It was not a horrible experience. I shouldn't say it like that. But it was incredibly painful because the relationship was hidden and it could not be explored because we were respecting the marriage, and the yearning and the longing and the attraction was debilitating at times. But it was safe because it had a cap on it. It wasn't like today where, again, I don't know this person, so I don't want to project too much onto the moment. But the intensity of the attraction that I felt, the magnetism that I felt, did not feel capped. So it felt unsafe versus my first twin flame experience, which had a limit to it. It had a regulator to it. And that's what kept me in my head and my logic and more disconnected from my experience. And yes, there was the magnetism there, and it was very rich, and it was very intense, and it was very beautiful, but always in the back of my mind, I knew it couldn't go anywhere. And that's a different ballgame. It's actually a different potential that is greeting you in the face. And so it allows you to explore, but it creates a safety mechanism around it to where it's like, well, this isn't a pool that I can really get into. I can dip my toe in. I can look at it from the edge. I can talk to the lifeguard. But I can't fully immerse myself in it. And so what happens is that we keep ourselves stuck where it is safe. Because when we are frightened by the prospect, when we are discovering the depth of what could be, there's something inside of us that tells us to go back to where we are comfortable and familiar. And it takes a leveling up of our conscious intent to decide to create something different. And that requires practice and discipline. But to even get there, there has to be the seat of awareness to realize what we're doing. Because many people stay stuck in soul contract journeys that are safe, that give them an experience that they can handle, that doesn't challenge them too much, but it does challenge them. And it's almost like the frustration and the feelings that come up as a result are actually by choice. When you zoom out, so for example, my first twin flame experience, as I mentioned, they were married. I don't want to get fully into their story, but they were contemplating making a big change in their life, irrespective of our journey. And they had been contemplating this for decades, but they felt stuck because of the circumstances of their life. And the twin flame journey propelled this person to leave, and they did. And they initiated a conversation about having a divorce, started looking for an apartment, told friends and family. And that's when we stuck the foot in the pool. And something happened where they had this moment like I had today, and I could feel it. I could feel the moment. I could feel everything change. They had this moment, and within 12 hours, the landscape of the future drastically changed, where they went back and they reconciled with their wife. And it always felt like to me that they had that moment standing at the grocery store, at the organic store, just like I did. And they chose the exit button. But the way that they framed it, to me at least, was that this was not their decision. Isn't that remarkable? That they were doing it for other people. They were doing it for their wife. They were doing it for these other reasons. Well, it turns out that when those other reasons passed, they still stayed. And we've had contact. By all accounts, it seems like that was the right decision for them and the best decision for a variety of different reasons. But the position of consciousness in that moment when we were talking was, I want to leave. I'm stuck. This is my prison, but I can't because of X, Y, and Z. But now that X, Y, and Z are no longer on the table, it reveals that it was not about that. It never was about X, Y, and Z. You see what I mean? We make decisions based on fear, based on this predictive ability to forecast into the future of this idea of what it means to live. And when that fear overtakes us, or when we feel that we don't have the confidence to navigate those situations, then what happens is we don't always realize that on the inside. We don't always recognize our own fear reaction. I could feel my fear standing in the store, and I had to intentionally receive this person's direct gaze and signal that it was me, the conscious being in this avatar form, that energetically was aligned with whatever vibration I was sending out to them. I had to acknowledge that because I could feel that they felt it. I could feel the dynamic. And that requires personal work. Sometimes for me that took years and multiple failed encounters of realizing that my manifestations were not leading me to the designs of my reality that I wanted to get to. And when we are afraid and we are not cognizant of it, we put it on other people. So similarly, in that first twin flame experience that I referenced, I too was afraid. We were mirroring each other. And I too had my moments, but I couldn't recognize them as they were playing out. I was actually deeply frightened for different reasons. And I couldn't detect that in my interactions at that time. And so as a result, everything played out the way it was supposed to. But it revealed to me that the way I was making decisions and building my life experience needed to change. There was something in my decision-making matrix to attach myself to an experience with somebody who was married that I didn't want to repeat again. And I didn't want to go through that. So I had to do the internal work to unstuck myself. But where I see a lot of people get lost in the experience of soul contracts is that they hyper-focus on the object of their attention or affection or romantic liaison or the journey itself, and they don't budge from that, even though it's not working for them, and even though it's not right, even though either their partner is unavailable or they're not treating them right, or they're being hidden, or they're being excluded, or everybody has their own gamut. And I'm not talking about you if you are in a twin flame or a soul contract experience that is treating you the way that you want and is headed to the union. There's a lot of people that are stuck. And there's a lot of people that are in the throes of turbulence on a day-to-day basis because the configuration of the relationship dynamic is actually not what their soul is crying out for. And they're there to learn a lesson. And some of those lessons are a little more painful than others. But there is this steadfast nature and almost stubbornness to saying, well, this is my soul contract and this is my forever person. Even though they're not making the moves in the 3D to honor the relationship. And this is where I believe that people regulate themselves to be in a situation that is more comfortable, easier, other person's unavailable. So they get to experience a little taste of it, but not the whole thing. And at some level, psychologically, that is safe for them because they don't have the tools or the confidence to be able to go into the depths of the water. So they stick a toe in or a foot in. And where I believe that responsibility could be improved is recognizing that actually they're afraid of what it would feel like to truly have an available partner that was ready and right there acknowledging them and turning around to greet them in the eyes. And that is getting to a next level relationship. When you open yourself up to somebody who is available, who is at your level, who is doing the work, who is ready.